On for a while to talk a little Celtics with us. What's going on, Bobby? How you doing?
Joe, long overdue. Happy to be here. Good listening in. I love the baseball talk. Happy to see Adrian Beltre go in, a favorite soccer of mine. So happy to be here.
All right, man. So the news broke today. I guess we should start with the first news of the day. The Miami Heat have acquired Terry Rozier. They're moving on from Kyle Lowry's contract. Maybe this is a move that they've been trying to do for a while to move on from Lowry. But what are your thoughts on Rozier going to Miami, and what has his game been like since he's left Boston?
He's steadily improved, and he's gotten a lot of opportunity there in Charlotte. LaMelo Ball has been hurt over the last couple of years, so he'll step into that lead ball handling role when Ball is down, and he's made the most of it this year, shooting 45% off the bounce from three. And his defense hasn't been great. I mean, that's the worst defense in the NBA in Charlotte there. So, you're wondering if that's a product of that system and the players around him there. It's team-oriented defensively more than ever in the league now. So that'll be something to watch. That's obviously a defensive-oriented team down there in Miami. But they need shooting. They need playmaking. And Kyle Lowry's game just steadily deteriorated over the couple of years. That wasn't a great deal, bringing him in from Toronto in the end. He, had those intangibles, and he'd make a defensive play or a rebound here or there, but his shooting, his overall offensive repertoire just declined immensely, and he missed a lot of time in different spots there. So that swap out is a good fit for them. I think he's going to fit the culture down there. I think it's a really good value deal, too. It's a protected pick that they're giving up. Maybe tie some of their future flexibility up to that deal a little bit, but you end up with a $20 million salary in Rozier that you could flip later if you end up going for another star. So it makes them better this year and potentially into the future.
All right, so then the Milwaukee Bucks today. So one Celtics foe makes a move today for a former player, and the Milwaukee Bucks have fired Adrian Griffin. Reports sound like just him and Giannis weren't getting along, and they were tough in transition. Were you surprised that Milwaukee made this move so early in the season?
Yeah, I think surprise is the right word. Nothing stuns you with the league anymore. And, I was looking at some of the other names that lasted longer. I know Beeline and some others further back. So not the shortest coaching tenure ever, but certainly among them. And for a team that was in the second seed, it is surprising. It is curious that they didn't give it more time. And, maybe some more details will come out down the line. But just seeing them against the Celtics a couple of times, and obviously the most recent example wasn't a great one with the fifth game in 7 nights, and Celtics essentially calling that one off at halftime. But you see more in that first game that the two played. Just no defensive identity for a team that was the number one defense a year ago in the league, that had a steady, take away the rim, give up the three kind of approach under Mike Budenholzer that worked well. Maybe had some playoff issues with that approach, but was pretty good for getting through the regular season and being a top seed. It was pretty shocking to just see how undisciplined they were on that end, going between different systems. I know they changed early on because the players didn't like the system that they were running early on out there. So it was a mess. And even just, I don't know him well. I haven't covered him much this year, but even just interacting with him, it didn't seem like there was a ton to him. I know Giannis was pretty involved in selecting him and obviously has a big voice around that organization there. So I don't know what it says that he was in favor of this preseason and then maybe pivoted away from it this quickly. But there's a lot of stakes there, and he has been known over the last couple of years here to keep this organization's feet to the fire. So looks pretty wacky, looks pretty dysfunctional, but if Doc comes in and does a better job, it will be a worthwhile move.
Yeah, and just speaking of Doc Rivers, why didn't they just sign him as the coach off the bat?
It's a good question. It could be in his decision. Maybe he felt like he needed to step back and just kind of see what the landscape looked like further down the line. Obviously, that's a great job he picked up with ESPN, doing the main broadcast there. And it came around pretty quickly. I know in the Athletics reporting that he was doing some consulting with Milwaukee, trying to kind of consult that staff that didn't end up working out there. And it'll be interesting to see if he is the choice, how he ends up building a staff there. As we saw with the Celtics a year ago, it was pretty awkward, Joe Mazzulla working with Ime Udoka's staff, and then ultimately he needed to build almost an entirely new one the next year. So it's always something interesting when that happens, and certainly we haven't seen many coaches take on a championship caliber roster mid-season. And, the thing with Doc is the playoff success hasn't really been there going back over a decade now. So I get why there'll be some skepticism going in with this, but I've always felt like he's been able to manage personalities well. They need to figure out that Lillard-Giannis dynamic. It kind of reminds me of Harden and Embiid, the way that you had these two great players next to each other, but it seemed like they were kind of doing their own thing. There wasn't much pick and roll interaction between the two. They really didn't run many to start this year, and then obviously there's a big defensive issue there to clean up. So if you're the Celtics, you're feeling pretty good that this might be the top team you're going against, having all these issues mid-season, and maybe it works out for the best. But the biggest problem there, Joe, is they just don't have great personnel defensively, and that's hard to work with if you're going to try to fix this.
All right, talking about Bobby Manning, you can check out his work at CLNS. I was playing devil's advocate here. I in no way am I saying that the Celtics should fire Joe Mazzulla, but I ask you this, Bobby. If the Celtics had a little bit of a hiccup this year and looked like Mazzulla wasn't the guy, would the Celtics make the type of move that Milwaukee did today with Adrian Griffin with Joe Mazzulla?
It's tough to say, right, the hypothetical, but I do think they put, a coaching staff in position this season where if things did go sideways, they would have capable head coaching quality candidates behind Joe Mazzulla to, step into that position if it did go sideways. And of course, that's not how it's gone so far. They've been remarkably consistent, especially, I think it's a good mark of coaching that they've been able to win, as you saw last night, down one starter and two rotation guys, and sometimes two starters. They're winning games this year. And you've minimized the bad losses, which really, we didn't talk a ton last year, Joe, but the biggest problem I had with this team last year were just how many bad regular season games they dropped. The Pacers game, the Thunder one where they gave up 150, 3 Magic games. You haven't really had that this year. There was that Hornets game early on that was messy down the stretch. They've had their issues in crunch time that certainly need to be addressed here, and I do think that falls back on some coaching and, some improvements that Joe needs to make in those spots. But in terms of just his messaging, especially, the one thing I think that he deserves more credit for than anything this year is managing the 5-star personalities in the starting lineup, getting guys to sacrifice. Certainly Jaylen Brown, who had a rough start to the year, is now in that All-NBA conversation, and he was able to persevere through a big role change to start this year. So those are things I think he deserves credit for. Again, it's year 2. They were patient in year 1 despite the hiccups. Certainly the playoff hiccups were huge with him, and we'll see how that goes this year. But I do think they're more of a patient team, and you're going to see that in their deadline approach, I'm sure, too, here. They gave that core with Marcus Smart quite a few years before they broke that up. So I just don't think they're the type to make a rest decision like this. And, if that does go back to Giannis there in Milwaukee, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, at least yet in their careers, haven't shown to be the guys who are making those kind of, decisions or just kind of demands about the franchise, as far as we know. And Tatum's talked about that, too, him not kind of butting into front office decisions. I think that's been a big reason why they've been, at least since 2021 here, such a consistent and capable franchise.
Just looking ahead, we saw the Bucks make their move with a coach today. The Heat made a move to get Rozier. Do you think the Celtics will make a move at all this year? And listen, Hauser, Cornette, Pritchard, that's pretty much their bench. Do you think they'll add another guy?
I think you add another guy. You have this grand exception that used to last a year. Now it just lasts until the deadline because it disappears at the end of the league year. So I don't think you let them go. I won't get into the weeds here, but there's some big changes coming in terms of how teams as expensive as the Celtics can add in the future. It gets pretty prohibitive. So I think if you're going to add now, now's the time. And, they have a couple of different options. They could go after a buyout guy. Maybe Kelly Olynyk gets bought out. I know the Jazz have been playing better, but that would be an interesting one. He does fall just under that salary amount, $12 million, that if a guy gets bought out, they're eligible to sign. So that's one option there, certainly. But I also think it's going to be more of a narrow, complementary player. It's not going to get anyone excited, but Mike Muscala last year. They gave up a couple of second-round picks for him as insurance in case Robert Williams went down. I do think you need a capable bench player who's able to step into a role if someone else goes down. I think that's what this team needs right now. Hauser, Pritchard, Cornette, those guys have played their role, and they've played them well. But they're not the kind of players who can step in case of an injury, even just for one night in the playoffs. So I'd like John Conchar. You've heard that name forever. The Grizzlies season has just gone off the rails now with injuries, and he does fit into that Grant exception there. You have, I believe, 8 second-round picks to toss around now, if I have that right. So I don't think it'll cost a first. Maybe you end up piling together a ton of second rounders here to bring a guy like that in. Maybe send some salaries out to just offset the money. But he's an option. And then Najee Marshall, I know, is a name that's kind of been tossed around as well in New Orleans. They just dumped some money to get into the luxury tax, so maybe they'd create a little bit more wiggle room there by, sending out a guy who doesn't really play there, more of a 3-and-D type who, is used to that smaller role. And I think that's what you need, Joe, a guy who can play and play well if he needs to, but also is okay with not playing, because this team's top 6, top 7 is going to be its stalwarts if they're healthy going into the playoffs.
All right, what's up with Joe Mazzulla getting on you about your attire at these games?
So that was weird to me because I always wear a tie, Joe, almost always. So it wasn't the tie. It must have been the black suit that threw him off, which is a rarity for me. I've been known to go beige more often than not. So black was a switch up for me. And, I'll go back to it. I think it worked. I think there were more positive reviews than negative, but Joe wasn't a fan.
What do you think about, something from the town? I don't know. Obviously, I don't know. The nun mask probably wouldn't work, but
no.
Could you get John Hamm's suit, or I don't know? Is there something from the town that you could wear that he would comment on?
I think we could try that. Yeah, we'll definitely try something there.
All right. Well, he's Bobby Manning. Check out his work. CLNS Media. You guys crush it over there, man. I'm glad we had you on, and we'll do it again, man. Enjoy your time, and we will have you back on.
Thanks for the support, Joe. Enjoy the show. I love the show, too.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you. That's Bobby Manning. Check out all his work. CLNS. I knew CLNS when they were the Celtics late night show. How about that? That's what CLNS stood for way back in the day. I don't know if John and the guys remember me from then, or Nick. But yeah, we used to collab back in the day when I was on the Sports Blast. So they would do post-game shows every night. And they wanted to get their name out there, so I would give away their T-shirts on my show. Hey, right now you call it, we get you the CLNS T-shirt on the Sports Blast. That was called cross promotion back in the day. I don't know if we do that anymore, though, Skaz. I don't know if that's no. Hey man, how about you? I give you my T-shirts to give away. Oh, the old radio days, let me tell you guys, it was something. It was all a dream. I used to read Word Up magazine.